Daniel Reed pressed himself against the cold stone wall of the royal armory and watched through the narrow window. The young dragon prince moved across the training yard with movements that looked too heavy for a child. His crimson scales caught the afternoon light as he swung a blade nearly as long as his small body. Each strike against the practiced dummy sent splinters flying into the air that War Master Gorthan circled the 6-year-old like a predator studying wounded prey. The massive dragon's black scales seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. His voice boomed across the yard loud enough that Daniel heard every word through the thick glass. Weak. You hesitate before each strike. Do you think your enemies will wait for you to find courage? Prince Ravith adjusted his grip on the training sword and attacked the dummy again. This time he struck harder, faster, but his small arms trembled from the weight of the weapon. Daniel noticed the way the prince's wings drooped with exhaustion. Pathetic. Gorthan's tail whipped forward and swept Ravith's legs out from under him. The young prince crashed to the ground, the sword clattering away across the stones. Get up. Warriors do not lie in the dirt like common prey animals. Ravith pushed himself up slowly. His legs shook. Daniel could see blood seeping through the scales on the prince's knees where they had scraped against the rough training yard floor. The child reached for his sword, but Gorthan stepped on the blade. Why do you reach for your weapon? Show me you can fight without it. Show me you have the strength of your ancestors. The War Master lifted his foot and kicked the sword away. Attack me with your claws. Prove you are Draken. The young prince lunged forward with a small roar that sounded more frightened than fierce. Gorthan caught him by the throat and lifted him into the air with one massive hand. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he remained still in his hiding spot. He had learned during his 3 months in the palace that interfering with royal training meant severe punishment. You fight like you are already defeated. Gorthan dropped Ravith back to the ground. Return to your chambers. You disgrace your bloodline today. The War Master left the training yard without looking back. Ravith stayed on his knees for a long moment before finally pushing himself up and limping toward the palace entrance. Daniel stepped away from the window and hurried through the servant corridors. He reached the prince's chambers just before Ravith arrived. The young dragon pushed through the heavy door and stopped when he saw Daniel standing beside the bathing pool. Steam rose from the heated water that Daniel had prepared. Clean cloth bandages and healing salve sat on a nearby table. You saw. Ravith's voice came out small and tired. It was not a question. I saw you training very hard. Daniel kept his tone gentle as he gestured toward the pool. The water will help with the soreness. Ravith moved to the edge and slipped into the warm water with a soft hiss of pain. Daniel knelt beside the pool and began carefully cleaning the scrapes and cuts that covered the young prince's scales. Most of the other servants feared touching the royal family, but Daniel had discovered that Ravith relaxed under gentle care. War Master Gorthan says I am weak. Ravith stared at the water rather than meeting Daniel's eyes. He says I will never be a proper warrior if I cannot even lift a training sword without my arms shaking. You are 6 years old. Daniel rinsed the cloth and continued his work. Human children at 6 play games and learn to read. They do not train with weapons meant for adults. I am not human. I am Draken. We are born for war. But the way Ravith said it sounded like he was repeating something he had been told rather than something he believed. Daniel finished cleaning the wounds and helped the young prince out of the pool. He wrapped Ravith in soft, drying cloths and guided him to the sleeping platform. The prince's exhaustion showed in every movement. Why are you not afraid of me? Ravith asked suddenly. The other servants shake when I enter a room. They lower their eyes and speak in whispers. But you look at me like I am just another person. Daniel considered the question as he applied healing salve to the deeper cuts. On my world, we had a saying, judge others by their actions, not by what you fear they might do. You have never harmed me. You have never harmed any servant in this palace. So why would I fear you? Because I will grow up to be like War Master Gorthan. I will lead fleets across the galaxy and conquer worlds. That is what princes do. Maybe Daniel pulled a light blanket over the young dragon. Or maybe you will grow up to be someone different, someone who chooses his own path. Ravitha's eyes were already drooping with exhaustion. Will you tell me about your world? About Earth? Daniel settled into a chair beside the sleeping platform. There was a boy on Earth who found a wounded bird in his garden. The bird had a broken wing and could not fly. Everyone told the boy to leave it alone, that injured birds usually die anyway. But the boy brought the bird inside and cared for it every day. He fed it and kept it safe while the wing healed. Did the bird survive? Ravitha's voice came out drowsy. It did. And when the bird could fly again, the boy released it back into the sky. The bird flew away free, and the boy never saw it again. But he was happy because he had helped something helpless become strong. That is a strange story. Ravitha's eyes closed. Draken would say the boy wasted his time on a useless creature. Perhaps. But the boy learned something important. He learned that real strength is not about hurting things weaker than yourself. Real strength is using your power to protect and heal. Ravith made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been the beginning of sleep. His breathing deepened and slowed. For the first time since Daniel had been assigned to serve him, the young prince's face looked peaceful rather than tense with fear. Daniel remained in the chair and watched the child sleep. Outside the chamber windows, the Draken Empire's war fleet moved across the sky in training formations. The servants whispered that another conquest would begin soon. Another world would fall before the Empire's strength. But in this quiet room, a small dragon dreamed of wounded birds and gentle hands, and Daniel wondered if perhaps one person showing kindness to one child might someday change more than anyone expected. 3 years had passed since Daniel first became Prince Ravitha's personal attendant. The young dragon now stood nearly as tall as Daniel's chest, his crimson scales darker and stronger than before. But some things had not changed. War Master Gorthan still pushed the prince through brutal training sessions, and Daniel still waited each evening to tend the wounds that resulted. Today, Daniel knelt in a forgotten corner of the palace grounds where ancient stone walls created a small sheltered garden. His hands worked the rich soil around young plants he had coaxed from seeds brought with him from Earth. Tomatoes grew along one wall. Herbs filled clay pots arranged in careful rows. A small apple tree stood in the center, barely taller than Daniel himself, but already showing green fruit. Footsteps crunched on a gravel path behind him. Daniel looked up expecting another servant, but found Prince Ravith standing at the garden entrance. The 9-year-old dragon carried his practice sword, but his armor was unfastened and hanging loose, as if he had left training in a hurry. You are supposed to be in weapons practice. Daniel returned his attention to the herbs, carefully pinching off dead leaves. I told War Master Gorthan I needed to use the facilities. He believes it will take me longer than it actually does. Ravith moved closer to examine the plants. What are you doing? Growing food. This basil will be ready to harvest soon. The cook uses it in the evening meals. Ravith crouched beside the herb pots and touched one of the green leaves gently. His claw could have shredded the delicate plant, but he was careful not to damage it. I had never seen anyone grow things before. Drake can take what we need from conquered worlds. We do not plant it ourselves. Perhaps that is why your empire is always conquering new worlds. If you grew your own food, you would not need to take it from others. Daniel immediately regretted the words. Criticizing the empire could result in severe punishment, even from a child prince. But Ravith only tilted his head thoughtfully. I never considered that. Show me how it works. For the next hour, Daniel forgot about the danger of his position and simply taught. He explained how plants needed water, sunlight, and nutrients from the soil. He showed Ravith how to test if the earth was too dry or too wet. He demonstrated proper pruning techniques and how to identify healthy growth versus disease. Everything is connected, Daniel said as he worked. The plants feed the insects. The insects help pollinate more plants. Their waste enriches the soil. Even the weeds have a purpose in the greater cycle. Nothing exists alone. Everything depends on everything else. War Master Gorthan says dependence is weakness. He says true warriors need nothing from anyone. Daniel sat back on his heels and looked directly at the young prince. War Master Gorthan eats food grown by others. He wears armor forged by others. He flies ships built by others. He depends on thousands of people every day, but pretends he does not. That is not strength. That is foolishness. A small sound from a garden entrance made them both turn. Princess Silith, Ravith's younger sister, stood watching them with curious golden eyes. She was only 7 years old, her scales still pale pink rather than the deeper red they would become with age. "What are you doing?" She stepped into the garden without waiting for permission. "I followed you from the training yard, Ravith. You said you needed to relieve yourself, but you came here instead." Ravith's wings flared slightly with nervousness. "You cannot tell War Master Gorthan. Why would I tell him anything?" Silith moved to examine the apple tree. "He is mean and loud. I do not like him." "What is this?" "An apple tree from Earth." Daniel rose to his feet, unsure how to handle 2 royal children in his secret garden. "In a few months, it will produce fruit. Can I taste it?" Silith looked at him with the same direct gaze her brother used. No fear or hesitation. "When the fruit is ripe, yes. But you must help care for the tree if you want to share its apples. That is how growing things works. You give care and attention, and the plant gives back food and beauty." Silith nodded seriously. "I can do that. Ravith, this is much more interesting than your boring sword practice." For the next several weeks, both dragon children found excuses to visit Daniel's garden. They learned to water the plants properly, to identify pests and diseases, to harvest vegetables at the right time. Ravith asked constant questions about how different species work together in an ecosystem. Silith wanted to know everything about Earth and the other worlds in the galaxy. Daniel taught them more than gardening. He spoke of cooperation instead of conquest. He explained how diverse species each brought unique strengths that made the whole stronger. He told them stories of humans working alongside alien races to solve problems neither could solve alone. One afternoon, as they harvested tomatoes together, Silith asked the question Daniel had been dreading. "Why does the Empire not do these things? Why do we only know how to fight and conquer?" Ravith answered before Daniel could. "Because we were taught that strength means taking what you want. That mercy is weakness. That other species exist to serve us or die. But that is stupid." Silith held a ripe tomato carefully in her claws. "This tomato plant is not Draken. It does not serve us because it fears us. It grows because we gave it what it needed. We work together. That seems smarter than forcing it. You cannot explain that logic to War Master Gorthan." Ravith glanced toward the palace nervously. He would call it soft thinking, weak philosophy. Maybe War Master Gorthan is wrong. Silith bit into the tomato, and her eyes widened at the taste. "Oh, this is wonderful. Ravith, try one." Daniel watched the 2 young dragons share the harvest from plants they had helped grow. They laughed together, juice running down their scales, completely forgetting for a moment that they were being raised to be weapons of conquest. That evening, as Daniel cleaned the garden tools, he heard heavy footsteps approaching. He turned to find War Master Gorthan standing at the garden entrance, his massive frame blocking the light. "So this is where the prince disappears to during training." Gorthan's voice carried the promise of violence. "Growing vegetables like a common farmer. This is your influence, human." Daniel stood slowly, preparing for punishment. But before Gorthan could continue, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem, War Master?" The Empress herself glided into the garden, her silver scales gleaming with authority. "I heard you shouting from 3 corridors away." Gorthan bowed low. "Your Majesty, the human servant has been corrupting Prince Ravith with weak philosophies, teaching him to grow plants instead of focusing on his warrior training." The Empress examined the garden with calculating eyes. She picked a sprig of basil and inhaled its scent. "And yet I noticed the prince has become more focused in his diplomatic studies. His tutors report improved concentration and discipline. His combat scores have actually increased over the past month." She looked directly at Daniel. "What exactly have you been teaching my son?" "Patience, Your Majesty. Focus. The understanding that some goals require sustained effort over time rather than immediate force." The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, and Daniel realized how dangerous that smile was. "Continue your work, human. But understand this. If my son becomes weak, If he fails his trials because of your influence, you will suffer in ways that make death seem merciful." She left without another word. War Master Gorthan followed, shooting Daniel a look of pure hatred as he departed. Ravith emerged from behind the apple tree where he had been hiding. That was close. Too close. Daniel's hands shook slightly as he set down his tools. "We must be more careful." Or, Ravith said quietly, "I must become strong enough that no one can question my choices. Strong enough to protect you the way you have protected me." Daniel looked at the 9-year-old prince and saw determination in his eyes that had not been there before. Whatever seeds he had planted in this garden, they were not the only things beginning to grow. 5 years after Daniel first arrived at the palace, Prince Ravith prepared for his trial of ascension. The 14-year-old dragon now stood taller than most adult humans, his crimson scales polished to a mirror shine for the ceremony. War fleets waited in orbit above the palace, ready to follow the young prince on his first conquest. Daniel helped Ravith into his ceremonial armor in the pre-dawn darkness. His hands moved automatically through the familiar task of fastening straps and checking buckles, but his mind raced with worry. The trial demanded that Ravith lead an assault on a colony world and prove his warrior spirit through ruthless victory. Mercy or hesitation would be seen as failure. "You are quiet this morning." Ravith's voice had deepened over the years, but still carried that note of gentleness when he spoke to Daniel. "I'm always quiet." Daniel adjusted the shoulder plates and stepped back to examine his work. "You are thinking loud thoughts, though. I can tell." Ravith turned to face him. "You fear what I must do today." Daniel met his eyes. "I fear what they will force you to become." Ravith reached into a pouch at his belt and pulled out a small, smooth stone, gray and worn by water. "Do you recognize this?" "The ocean stone from Earth. I gave you that years ago. I have carried it every day since." Ravith closed his claws around it gently. "When War Master Gorthan pushes me to be cruel, I touch this stone and remember the boy who saved the wounded bird. I remember that strength can mean protection instead of destruction. Remembering and acting are different things. Today you will face a choice between what you know is right and what the Empire demands. That choice has consequences. Then I will face those consequences." Ravith secured the stone back in his pouch. "But I will not betray everything you taught me just to please War Master Gorthan." Daniel wanted to argue further, but horns sounded across the palace, signaling that the fleet was ready to depart. He watched Ravith leave the chamber, his wings folded tight against his armored back, and feared he would never see the gentle prince again. The journey to the target world took 3 days. Daniel was not permitted to accompany the fleet, but Silith visited him in the garden each evening with updates she gleaned from the communication officers. The target was a mining colony called Refuge, inhabited by the Silith, a species of 4-armed beings known for their skill in extracting rare minerals from deep within planets. On the 3rd evening, Silith arrived with news that the attack had begun. Daniel could not sleep that night. He tended his plants by lamplight and tried not to imagine what horrors Ravith might be committing among the Silith colonies. The fleet returned just before dawn. Daniel stood on the landing platform with other servants, waiting to see what kind of prince returned from his trial. The royal transport touched down and its ramps extended. War Master Gorthan emerged first, his face twisted with barely controlled rage. The other commanders followed, muttering among themselves with dark expressions. Then Ravith appeared. His armor was scorched and dented from battle. Blood stained his claws and scales. But his eyes were clear and calm as he descended the ramp. Behind him came a group of Silith, their 4 arms bound but their bodies unharmed. The Emperor waited at the base of the ramp, his silver scales gleaming in the rising sun. "Report, Prince Ravith. Tell us of your glorious conquest." Ravith knelt before his father, a gesture of respect required by ceremony. "I led the assault on Refuge as commanded. Our forces overwhelmed their defenses within 6 hours. The mining operations are now under Draken control, and the survivors." The Emperor's voice carried across the platform. "Traditional law requires their execution to demonstrate your strength. To show mercy would reveal weakness unfit for a future ruler." Ravith rose to his feet. I have studied our traditional laws extensively, Father. I found an interesting clause from a third dynasty. It states that conquered populations may be taken as protectorate vassals rather than executed, provided they swear absolute loyalty and contribute their unique skills to the empire's benefit. War Master Gorthan stepped forward, his voice a snarl. That law has not been invoked in 600 years. It was meant for species useful to the empire, not for proving a prince's warrior spirit. The Silith are useful. Ravith gestured to the bound aliens behind him. They can extract minerals from asteroids and deep planetary cores that our technology cannot reach. They can teach our engineers new techniques. Dead, they serve no purpose. Alive and loyal, they expand our capabilities. The Emperor studied his son with unreadable eyes. The entire platform fell silent. Daniel held his breath, knowing that Ravith had found a clever solution, but unsure if cleverness would be enough. You bend tradition rather than follow it directly. The Emperor circled Ravith slowly. You show mercy and call it strategic thinking. You spare your enemies and claim it serves the Empire. I show wisdom. Ravith's voice remained steady. Any warrior can destroy. True strength lies in knowing when destruction serves our goals and when preservation serves us better. Weak. War Master Gorthan spat the word. He has been corrupted by soft thinking. He dishonors our ancestors with this coward's logic. The Emperor raised one wing for silence. War Master, you have trained my son in combat for 14 years. Tell me, did he fight well during the assault? Gorthan's jaw clenched. His combat performance was acceptable. He personally defeated their defense commander in single combat. And did he show fear or hesitation when facing the enemy? No, Gorthan admitted reluctantly. He showed no fear. The Emperor turned back to Ravith. You have proven you can fight. You have proven you can lead. You have proven you can think beyond simple destruction. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I accept your decision regarding the Silith. They will become the first protectorate vassals of your generation. Ravith bowed deeply, relief flickering across his face. But the Emperor was not finished. However, your unorthodox methods have raised questions about your education. Specifically, questions about the influence of your human servant. The Emperor's gaze found Daniel in the crowd. Guards, bring the human forward. 2 armored Draken seized Daniel's arms and dragged him to the center of the platform. He tried to keep his expression neutral as the Emperor examined him like a curious specimen. You have served my son for 5 years. You have taught him many things, clearly beyond the simple duties of a servant. War Master Gorthan believes you have made him weak. Prince Ravith argues you have made him wise. The Emperor's claws extended slightly. I wonder which is true. Daniel forced himself to speak calmly despite his fear. I have taught him only what any teacher should, to think before acting, to consider consequences, to understand that different situations require different responses. Pretty words, but I need proof of their value. The Emperor turned to Ravith. Your next assignment will test whether your methods truly serve the Empire or whether War Master Gorthan is correct about your weakness. You will lead the invasion of New Hebrides, a major human colony world. You will face your servant's own people in battle. Ravith's wings flared in shock. Father, the terms are simple. If you conquer New Hebrides with the ruthless efficiency our empire demands, your human servant lives and continues his duties. If you show mercy to your own kind, if you allow sentiment to weaken your resolve, then Daniel will be executed for corrupting a prince of the realm. The Emperor smiled coldly. You have 1 month to prepare. Use that time to decide what matters more, your principles or your teacher's life. The Emperor left the platform with his royal guard. The commanders followed, leaving Ravith standing alone with a bound Silith behind him and Daniel still held by guards in front of him. Their eyes met across the distance. Daniel saw the agony in Ravith's expression and knew that everything he had tried to teach the young prince would now be tested in the cruelest way possible. War Master Gorthan had finally found the perfect trap, and neither Daniel nor Ravith could see a way out that did not require one of them to sacrifice everything. The month passed like a countdown to execution. Daniel continued his duties in Ravith's chambers, but the young prince barely spoke anymore. He spent his days in tactical planning sessions and his nights staring at star maps showing the approach route to New Hebrides. The ocean stone sat on his desk, untouched, that War Master Gorthan made certain that everyone in the palace knew the stakes. He held public training sessions where he lectured about the dangers of mercy and the necessity of ruthless victory. He brought in veterans who described in graphic detail how they had crushed human rebellions on other worlds. Each session ended with the same message. Sentiment was weakness, and weakness led to defeat. Daniel tried to give Ravith an escape from the pressure. One evening, he brought fresh herbs from the garden and prepared tea in the prince's chambers. Ravith accepted the cup, but did not drink. I keep thinking about every possible approach. Ravith's voice sounded tired beyond his years. Every tactical option, every strategic choice, they all end the same way. Either I destroy your people and prove myself a proper Draken warrior, or I show mercy and condemn you to death. There might be another path. Daniel sat across from him. You found one with the Silith. Perhaps. The Silith were a minor colony that no one in the Empire cared about. Ravith's wings flared with sudden anger. New Hebrides is a major human world with 2 million inhabitants. The Emperor chose it specifically because there is no clever legal clause that will save them. No ancient law that allows me to spare such a large population. This is a test designed for me to fail. Daniel remained silent. He had reached the same conclusion weeks ago. Ravith's anger faded as quickly as it had appeared. I cannot sacrifice you. You saved me from becoming a monster. You taught me that there was another way to be strong. How can I honor that teaching by slaughtering 2 million humans just to keep you alive? And I cannot let you throw away everything for one person. Daniel set down his tea. 2 million lives matter more than mine. If my death means they survive, no. Ravith rose to his feet. I have watched this empire conquer and destroy for 14 years. I have seen War Master Gorthan break young soldiers until they were nothing but weapons. I have listened to the Emperor justify endless violence in the name of strength. And through all of it, you were the only person who showed me something different, something better. Losing you means losing the only proof I have that another way is possible. Then what will you do? Ravith looked out the window at the war fleet assembling in orbit. I will find a third option, something that neither the Emperor nor War Master Gorthan anticipates. I will show them that true strength is not about choosing between cruelty and weakness. True strength is creating solutions that preserve life while still achieving victory. That sounds like wisdom. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. I taught you well. You taught me everything that matters. Ravith picked up the ocean stone from his desk and closed his claws around it gently. Now I need to prove those lessons were worth learning. The next morning, guards came for Daniel while he was tending the garden. They dragged him to a detention cell deep within the palace. Princess Silith appeared at the cell door that evening, her golden eyes filled with worry. Ravith demanded that Father reconsider the terms. Father refused. War Master Gorthan is celebrating, saying this proves the human corrupted the prince with cowardice. She pressed a small piece of paper through the bars. Ravith sent this. He said to tell you he remembers the wounded bird. Daniel unfolded the paper after Silith left. It contained only a few words in Ravith's careful handwriting. Trust me. Play the game. Remember that mercy can look like many things. He spent the next week in the cell, fed basic rations, and given no information about what was happening outside. He tried to understand what Ravith meant, but could find no strategy that satisfied both the Emperor's demands and the prince's conscience. That on the 8th day, the cell door opened. War Master Gorthan stood in the doorway, his expression smug. Get up, human. You are needed for the invasion. The Emperor wants you to witness your prince's choice in person. They brought Daniel aboard the flagship in chains. He was confined to a small observation room with a window overlooking the command deck. Below him, Ravith moved among the fleet commanders, his armor gleaming as he issued orders. The young prince did not look up at Daniel's window. Through the viewport, Daniel watched New Hebrides grow larger as they approached. The planet's green and blue surface looked painfully like Earth. Thousands of ships in orbit marked it as a prosperous colony with robust defenses. This would not be an easy conquest. Ravith's voice came through the ship's communication system, addressing the entire fleet. Warriors of the Draken Empire, today we prove our strength against a worthy opponent. The humans of New Hebrides have built a civilization here. They have families, homes, dreams. They will fight desperately to protect what they have created. Daniel's heart sank. The speech sounded like every other pre-battle address he had heard from Draken commanders. Where was the third option Ravith had promised? Traditional Draken strategy would have us destroy their orbital defenses, bombard their cities from space, and crush their spirit before landing ground forces. Ravith paused. But I'm not interested in traditional strategy. I am interested in victory that proves our empire's superiority not just in weapons, but in wisdom. War Master Gorthan's voice cut through the channel. Prince Ravith, what are you suggesting? I challenge the colonial governor of New Hebrides to single combat under ancient Draken War law. If their champion defeats me, our fleet withdraws and acknowledges human strength. If I defeat their champion, the colony surrenders and accepts protectorate status without further bloodshed. The command deck erupted in shocked voices. War Master Gorthan appeared on the viewport screen, his face twisted with rage. This is madness. You risk your life and our fleet's honor on a duel. What if you lose? Then our empire learns a valuable lesson about underestimating humans. Ravith's voice remained calm. War Master, you have trained me since I was 6 years old. Do you doubt my combat abilities? Gorthan's jaw clenched. I do not doubt your skill. I doubt your judgment. Fortunately, judgment is not your concern. Combat effectiveness is. So let me ask again, can I win this fight? A long silence followed. Then Gorthan spoke through gritted teeth. Yes, against any human champion, you would win. Then we proceed. Ravith cut the communication and opened a channel to New Hebrides. This is Prince Ravith of the Draken Empire. I offer terms. Send your best warrior to meet me on the surface. We will fight according to traditional laws. Your champion wins. We leave. I win. You surrender peacefully and become a protectorate under my personal authority. Daniel watched the command deck screens as responses flooded in from the colony. Their governor appeared on the main viewer, a stern woman with gray hair and calculating eyes. Why will we trust Draken honor? Your empire has broken treaties before. I give you my personal word. Ravith moved to stand directly in front of the communication pickup. I'm 14 years old. I could order a full invasion that would kill thousands of your people before you could mount an effective defense. Instead, I offer one life against one life. Mine against your champion. Does your colony have anyone brave enough to accept that challenge? The governor studied him for a long moment. We do. Meet us at the northern landing field in 2 hours. Come alone. Any treachery and our orbital defenses will destroy your flagship. Ravith smiled. I would expect nothing less. As he left the command deck to prepare, he finally looked up at Daniel's window. Their eyes met across the distance. Ravith touched his chest where the ocean stone hung beneath his armor, and Daniel understood. The prince was not sacrificing millions for one person. He was risking everything on his own ability to win, betting that his years of brutal training could be used to save lives instead of end them. War Master Gorthan appeared in Daniel's observation room, his massive frame filling the doorway. Your prince is a fool. If he loses, you die anyway. The emperor will execute you for corrupting him with weakness. If he wins through this ridiculous duel instead of proper conquest, you still die because he showed mercy instead of strength. Daniel met the War Master's gaze. Then I will die knowing I helped raise someone who chose to be better than you. Gorthan's claws extended. We will see. Combat revial tous. Let us discover what your pretty words have really created. The transport brought Daniel down to the surface under heavy guard. War Master Gorthan insisted that Daniel witness what his teachings had created, whether that meant watching Ravith's victory or his death. They positioned him at the edge of the designated combat zone, still in chains, but with a clear view of the circular arena marked out on the landing field. Thousands of human colonists ringed the combat area, held back by hastily erected barriers. Above them, both Draken warships and human defense platforms waited with weapons charged. One wrong move from either side would trigger devastation that would kill everyone present. Ravith stood at the center of the arena, his armor removed except for basic plates that protected vital areas. Draken combat law required that duels be fought without technological advantages, relying only on natural weapons and skill. His crimson scales gleamed in the afternoon sun. His claws extended and retracted in a steady rhythm as he focused his breathing. Daniel noticed the ocean stone hanging from a chain around Ravith's neck, clearly visible against his chest scales. The human champion emerged from the crowd on the opposite side. Daniel's breath caught when he saw who New Hebrides had chosen. The man stood nearly 2 meters tall, his body covered in military-grade augmentation scars. Mechanical implants enhanced his muscles and reflexes. His arms bore the markings of the Terran Defense Forces, the elite soldiers who had fought the Draken Empire to a standstill on 3 different worlds before finally being defeated. That is Owen Cross, one of the guards told War Master Gorthan. He was a commander during the Battle of Kepler Station. His unit killed 47 Draken warriors before they were overwhelmed. The humans do not fight fairly, using their technology to compensate for their physical weakness. Gorthan watched Cross approach the center of the arena. The boy prince wanted single combat. Let him discover what human desperation looks like. The colonial governor stepped forward to set the terms. Under Draken law, this combat continues until one fighter yields or dies. No interference from either side. The winner's terms are binding on both parties. She looked between Ravith and Cross. Are you both prepared? Cross nodded once, his mechanical implants humming with stored energy. Ravith simply touched the ocean stone at his chest and said, "I am ready." The governor stepped back. "Begin." Cross moved first, faster than any unaugmented human should move. His fist drove toward Ravith's chest with enough force to crack dragon scales. But Ravith was already shifting sideways, his years of brutal training evident in every movement. He caught Cross's arm and used the man's momentum to throw him across the arena. Cross rolled with the throw and came up in a fighting stance. "You are fast for someone your age, Prince, but speed alone will not save you." They circled each other, testing distances and reactions. Cross attacked again, a series of rapid strikes that would have overwhelmed a lesser fighter. Ravith blocked most of them, but took several hits that left cracks in his chest plates. Dragon blood seeped through the damaged armor that War Master Gorthan leaned forward with interest. The human is stronger than expected. The prince bleeds. Daniel's chains cut into his wrists as he gripped the barrier. He wanted to shout advice, to warn Ravith about the patterns he saw in Cross's attacks. But any interference would invalidate the duel and doom them all. Ravith changed his strategy. Instead of matching Cross's speed and strength, he began fighting defensively. He used his wings for balance, his tail for additional leverage, his claws for precision strikes at joints and weak points in Cross's augmented body. Each exchange taught him more about his opponent's patterns. Cross grew frustrated as his attacks failed to land decisive hits. He increased his speed, drawing more power from his implants. Steam rose from the heat vents in his shoulders as his augmentations ran at maximum capacity. "You fight well for a child," Cross shouted over the sound of combat. "But you cannot win this. I have 20 years of combat experience. I have fought your kind across 3-star systems. Surrender now, and I promise your people safe withdrawal." Ravith ducked under a spinning kick and responded with a tail strike that swept Cross's legs. "I cannot surrender. Too many lives depend on this outcome." They crashed together in the center of the arena, claws against augmented fists, dragon strength against human technology. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground. Spectators on both sides shouted encouragement or warnings. Daniel saw the moment when Ravith understood his opponent completely. The prince stopped trying to overpower Cross and started using the lessons Daniel had taught him in the garden. He remembered explaining how plants bend with the wind instead of resisting it. how water flows around obstacles instead of trying to destroy them. How true strength sometimes means letting your opponents force work against themselves. Ravith shifted his entire approach. He became fluid instead of rigid, responsive instead of aggressive. When Cross attacked, Ravith redirected rather than blocked. When Cross tried to grapple, Ravith slipped away. He made the older warrior waste energy chasing attacks that never landed. Cross's augmentations began to fail from overuse. Smoke poured from his shoulder vents. His movements slowed as his mechanical enhancements overheated. But he was not finished yet. With a roar of determination, he grabbed Ravith in a crushing bear hug, mechanical arms compressing the prince's ribs with terrible pressure. Ravith's wings flared in pain. Dragon blood dripped from his mouth where the pressure had injured internal organs. War Master Gorthin stood up, thinking the fight was over, but Ravith did not panic. He relaxed completely in Cross's grip, conserving his strength for one precise strike. His claws found the power coupling at the base of Cross's spine, the central node that controlled all his augmentations. One precise strike severed the connection. Cross's mechanical arms released as his implants shut down completely. He stumbled backward, suddenly fighting with only his natural human strength against a dragon who had trained since childhood in combat. It was over in seconds. Ravith's claws pressed against Cross's throat, not breaking the skin, but making the outcome clear. "Yield," Ravith said quietly. "You fought with honor. There is no shame in yielding now." Cross looked up at the young dragon prince, seeing something in Ravith's eyes that surprised him. Not cruelty or conquest, but respect. He slowly raised his hands in surrender. "I yield. New Hebrides accepts your terms." The crowd erupted in noise, humans shouting in relief and dismay. Draken commanders arguing about what this victory meant. Ravith stepped back and offered Cross his clawed hand to help the man to his feet. Cross hesitated, then accepted the gesture. "You could have killed me," Cross said as they walked to the edge of the arena together. "Why show mercy? Because my teacher showed me that real strength is not about how many you can destroy. Real strength is knowing when destruction serves no purpose." Ravith touched the ocean stone at his chest. "You were willing to die for your people. That deserves respect, not execution." The colonial governor approached with legal documents already prepared. New Hebrides formally accepts protectorate status under Prince Ravith's personal authority. We maintain local government, but acknowledge Draken's sovereignty. Our resources will be shared, but not exploited. Our people will retain their rights and freedoms. Ravith read the terms carefully. Daniel recognized the influence of their garden conversations in every clause. This was not conquest, but cooperation, not domination, but partnership. Ravith signed the documents with steady claws. War Master Gorthin descended from the observation platform, his face unreadable. He examined the signed treaty, then looked at Ravith with something that might have been grudging respect. "You won your duel. You secured the colony's surrender. Technically, you have fulfilled your father's demands." Gorthin's jaw clenched. "But you did it through mercy disguised as strategy. The Emperor will have to decide if that counts as true victory or clever weakness. Then let him decide." Ravith removed his damaged armor plates and stood straight despite his injuries. "I have proven that my methods work. I have conquered a major human colony without destroying it. I have added 2 million productive citizens to the Empire instead of creating 2 million corpses that serve no one. If Father calls that weakness, then our definition of strength needs examination." Gorthin started to respond, but stopped when Ravith suddenly swayed on his feet. The adrenaline of combat was fading, and his injuries were more severe than he had shown. Daniel broke free from his distracted guards and ran to catch Ravith before he collapsed. "I have you," Daniel said as he supported the prince's weight. "You did well. You found your third option." I remembered the wounded bird. Ravith's voice came out weak. "You helped it fly again. I wanted to do the same for these people. Give them wings instead of breaking them." War Master Gorthin watched this display with narrowed eyes. Then he turned to his guards. "Bring them both back to the flagship. The prince needs medical attention." And the Emperor will want to see his son before deciding the humans' fate. As they carried Ravith to the transport, Daniel looked back at New Hebrides. Human colonists were already approaching Draken soldiers cautiously, testing whether this new arrangement might actually mean peace. Owen Cross stood among them, watching the transport depart with an expression of cautious hope. Daniel did not know if he would live to see tomorrow. But he knew that Ravith had planted seeds today that might grow into something the Draken Empire had never seen before. Victory through wisdom instead of violence. Strength through protection instead of destruction. The wounded bird had learned to fly. Now they would discover if the Empire would let it soar or clip its wings forever. 8 months after the duel on New Hebrides, Daniel worked in the palace gardens under a warm sun. The small corner that had once been his secret hiding place now sprawled across 3 terraces. Young Draken soldiers knelt in the soil beside human colonists, Silith miners, and representatives from 6 other species, all learning to grow food together. Princess Silith moved among them like a teacher, correcting technique and praising progress. At 16 years old, she had become one of the most vocal supporters of Ravith's new approach to governance. She stopped beside Daniel and examined a flowering plant he had just transplanted. This one is from the Silith homeworld, yes? The blue flowers that only bloom in moonlight. They agreed to share seeds in exchange for apple tree saplings. Daniel brushed soil from his hands. Trade instead of conquest. Your brother's idea works better than anyone expected. Silith smiled. War Master Gorthan still complains that we're making the Empire soft, but even he cannot argue with the results. Production is up across all Protectorate worlds. Rebellions have decreased by 60%. We have more resources than when we were simply taking what we wanted, because people work harder when they benefit from their labor. Daniel stood and stretched his back. Simple concept. It just took someone brave enough to try it. Footsteps on the stone path announced Ravitha's arrival. The young prince, now 15, had grown even larger over the past months. His crimson scales bore new scars from combat training, but his eyes held a brightness that had not been there before. The ocean stone still hung from a chain around his neck. Father wants to see us both. Ravitha's tone was neutral, but Daniel caught the tension beneath it. They walked through the palace corridors together, no longer servant and master, but something closer to friends. Daniel had been officially released from servitude 6 months ago, after the Emperor reluctantly acknowledged that Ravitha's methods produced better results than traditional conquest. But Daniel had chosen to stay, claiming the gardens needed his attention. The truth was more complex. He stayed because Ravith still needed guidance, because the ideas they had nurtured together were still fragile, because the Empire could still revert to its old ways if no one maintained a new path. The Emperor waited in his private chambers rather than the throne room, a sign that this meeting was personal rather than official. He looked older than Daniel remembered, as if the weight of maintaining an empire through violence had finally begun to show. "Sit," the Emperor commanded. They obeyed, Daniel keeping his eyes respectfully lowered while Ravith met his father's gaze directly. "Ravith, your protectorate system has been running for 8 months now. The Council of Ministers presents daily reports arguing both for and against continuing your experiment." The Emperor poured 3 glasses of wine, an unprecedented gesture that suggested this was not a formal audience. War Master Gorthan leads the opposition, claiming we are losing our warrior spirit. But the economic advisors show that we're gaining more resources through cooperation than we ever did through pure conquest. The numbers do not lie, Father. Ravith accepted a glass but did not drink. Happy populations produce more than terrified ones. Protected species contribute willingly what we used to have to take by force. We get the same resources with a fraction of the military expenditure. But at what cost to our culture? Our identity? The Emperor took a long drink. We are Draken. We are warriors. What happens when we stop being feared across the galaxy? What happens when other species see us as partners instead of conquerors? Daniel spoke before he could stop himself. What happens is you build something that lasts. Empires built on fear always collapse eventually. Empires built on mutual benefit can endure for generations. The emperor's gaze snapped to Daniel. For a moment, the human servant feared he had overstepped fatally. But then the emperor laughed, a tired sound without much humor. Still teaching my son your human philosophies, I see. The ones that War Master Gorthan insists will destroy us. The emperor set down his glass. Here is what I have decided. I am old, Daniel. Older than I should be to rule an empire this size. I have spent 40 years conquering, crushing rebellions, maintaining control through strength. It is exhausting work that never ends. He turned to Ravith. I am making you crown prince effective immediately. Not just heir to the throne, but active co-ruler with full authority over the protectorate territories. You will have 5 years to prove your system works on a larger scale. If it succeeds, if the empire remains strong and prosperous, then your methods become official policy. If it fails, if we lose territory or face successful rebellions, then we return to traditional conquest. Ravith's wings flared in shock. Father, I am only 15. I was 14 when I led my first campaign. Age is irrelevant. Capability is what matters. The emperor pulled out a formal document already prepared. War Master Gorthan will continue training you in combat, because even peaceful empires need warriors. But Daniel will serve as your official advisor on governance and interspecies relations. Daniel blinked in surprise. Your Majesty, I am not qualified. You are more qualified than anyone else in this palace. The emperor's expression softened slightly. You taught my son to see beyond simple violence. You showed him that strength can take many forms. I spent years trying to make him into a weapon. You spent years teaching him to be a leader. Let us see whose approach serves the empire better. The emperor stood, signaling the meeting's end. But he paused at the door and looked back at them both. Ravith, one more thing. The Council of Voices you established is causing significant debate. Some ministers think giving conquered species a platform to speak is dangerous. They fear it will lead to demands for independence. It might, Ravith admitted, but better they voice grievances in council chambers where we can address them than let resentment build until it explodes into violence. Spoken like someone who has never had to crush a rebellion personally. The emperor's tone was dry. But you may get your chance to test that philosophy soon. The Krennic Collective is watching your protectorate system with great interest. They have sent ambassadors requesting negotiations for voluntary alliance rather than forced conquest. Ravith's eyes widened. The Krennic? Father, they have been our enemies for 200 years. They would never surrender to the old empire. But your new approach interests them. They see benefit in cooperation. The emperor's expression was unreadable. Negotiate with them if you wish. Prove that your philosophy works even with longtime enemies. Or fail and prove War Master Gorthan right that mercy is weakness. After the emperor left, Ravith and Daniel sat in silence for several minutes. The weight of what had just happened settled over them like a heavy blanket. I am not ready for this, Ravith said finally. Co-ruler of the empire at 15? Negotiations with the Krennic? What if I fail? What if Gorthan is right and I am just naive? Daniel reached over and touched the ocean stone hanging from Ravith's neck. You were 6 years old when I gave you this. A frightened child who had been taught that kindness was weakness. Look at what you have become. Look at what you have built. They walked to the window and looked out over the palace grounds. On the garden terraces, dozens of species worked together in the afternoon light. Children from 3 different worlds played near the apple tree that Daniel had planted years ago, now tall and heavy with fruit. This is what we created, Daniel continued. Not through weapons or fear, but through showing others a better way. The Krennic are coming to you because they see this. They see an empire that might finally be worth joining instead of fighting. And if I make mistakes, if my idealism causes harm, then you will learn, adjust, and try again. That is what leaders do. They do not need to be perfect. They need to be willing to grow. Daniel smiled. Besides, you will not be alone. Silas supports you. The protectorate species trust you. Owen Cross from New Hebrides has been telling other human colonies about the dragon prince who chose mercy over massacre. You have allies, Ravith. Use them. Ravith touched the ocean stone again, then straightened his wings with decision. Then we begin tomorrow. I want the Krennic ambassadors treated with the same respect we show any other diplomatic mission. I want representatives from every protectorate species present at the negotiations. Let them all see that this empire is changing. War Master Gorthan will call it weakness. Let him. I defeated a veteran soldier in single combat when I was 14. I conquered New Hebrides without destroying it. I have nothing left to prove to Gorthan. Ravith's voice carried new confidence. The wounded bird has learned to fly, Daniel. Now we teach the Empire to fly with us. They left the Emperor's chambers and returned to the gardens. Young Draken soldiers looked up from their work and saluted Ravith respectfully. Human colonists greeted Daniel with friendly waves. Silith miners shared their lunch, with everyone willing to try their unusual food. Somewhere in the palace, War Master Gorthan was probably plotting how to undermine these changes. Somewhere in the Empire, old generals muttered about lost traditions and warrior honor. But here in the gardens, different species worked together and built something new. Daniel had been brought to this empire as a captive, expected to serve until death. Instead, he had helped raise a dragon prince who chose kindness over cruelty. He had planted seeds of change in soil that everyone said was too harsh to grow anything gentle. Those seeds had become gardens. Those gardens had become terraces. Those terraces were becoming an empire that finally understood the difference between power and strength. The wounded bird had taught the dragon to fly. Now they would see how high they could soar together.